Hey guys, Ben here and welcome back to another video on The Flash Season 9. Today we're going to be doing my review for episode 11, so if you do go on to enjoy the video, please be sure to leave a like and a comment and subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any future DCTV videos later this year. So this is part 2 of A New World graphic novel that Eric Wallace is doing for The Flash's final 4 episodes. We're on episode 2. I guess the reason it's called The Blues is because pretty much everyone, including Malcolm and Iris, are looking back at the past and they've got the blues, as you call it. Obviously it's not necessarily straight up exactly the same feelings that they're feeling, but that's just the way that I interpreted this title. So this episode is actually taking place at the same time, so it's running parallel to what happened in episode 10. So imagine if this episode was cut in between those scenes of Barry in the past, in the last episode with his mum and with Reverse Flash. This is because obviously they were separated and Cobalt Blue is working in different time periods. They have that ability somehow to be in many places at once and to manipulate things as they like. So Malcolm is back. Let's talk about that. Obviously he didn't leave and go anywhere since the end of last episode, but he shows up at CCPD in the future and the whole precinct goes completely quiet because Eddie is back and they all think they've seen a ghost, but in fact it's actually just Malcolm at this point, and so he's here to get answers about who Eddie Thawne is, which was teased at the end of last episode. But let's go back to Star Labs and check in with them because Barry has been missing for many hours, and according to Chester and his analysis, he's found trace amounts of cobalt isotopes, and so they figure the reason that Barry is not here and disappeared just completely out of nowhere with this blue energy is somehow linked to cobalt and the fact that someone has been able to harness cobalt. We'll find out more about this as we go on throughout this episode. And so completely out of nowhere, as the team talk about Barry being missing and try and figure out what's going on, Mark randomly shows up and it felt weird, and I think there is a good reason for that and we'll get into that in a bit, but he's back to help save Barry apparently because Barry has never given up on him. And so meanwhile Iris goes to CC Citizen Media with Allegra, they have a chat and Iris pulls up an old draft of The Flash missing vanishes in crisis. It's not a new article despite some of us thinking maybe she was kind of cashing in on Barry being disappeared, but we all know that she is heavy in labor, so she's way along the way. So it doesn't look like publishing new articles is going to be in the books for at least the next few weeks. And so in this conversation, Iris talks about old Nora who grew up without a father and the fact that she wants this new version of Nora to grow up with a better life and with their father, Barry, of course, because that was a major difference between that old Nora that we saw back in season 4 and season 5 compared to this new Nora we've been seeing since those timeline changes. And so Allegra wants to help Iris. She's very serious at this point, and that's all she can pretty much do in this episode because if you didn't know, the actor who plays Allegra directed this episode, so she is knocked out pretty quickly by Cobalt Blue or someone wielding the power of Cobalt Blue. And so I'm pretty sure she seemed like a little bit different. Maybe that's because she's directing the episode and playing it in the way that she wanted to play it. And so as Allegra gets attacked, there is a gas leak of this deadly toxic gas, and Thawne shows up after Iris puts out an emergency signal. 2 of Iris's employees are knocked to the ground. There's that annoying reporter and there's the other guy. I think he's appeared in a couple of episodes. Anyway, that's not significant. But Thawne grows some sort of like plant cells inside their body in order to help them breathe. It's kind of weird. They kind of turn into the Hulk. They're all green. But what follows is even weirder because back at Star Labs, Mark is mad at Thawne for using her powers. So you're like, is he messing with her? What is going on? And even at the end, he calls her an abomination. At that point, you know, this is not Mark. This is not how he talks, and this is confirmed when his eyes glow blue. So he has been taken over by the crystal, just like Joe in the previous episode. Obviously that was in the past, but the crystal does the same thing, and as we've already established, Cobalt Blue can go absolutely anywhere within the timeline and be in multiple places at once, controlling all these different people, trying to attack Team Flash and knock everyone out one by one. And so that's the goal of taking over Mark's body to gain everyone's trust and then wipe them out. So Cobalt Blue is coming for Team Flash, and obviously his powers do radiate cobalt, so that is his kind of signature. That's how they are going to be able to track his movements and what he's doing. But in the meantime, in the future, and that is confirmed at the end of the episode when you see the new captain, who is a current worker at CCPD. We've seen her many times, so you know, that's just a familiar face. Who is the new captain. You're like, okay, this is definitely the future. Plus also, if you see her weapon, it's not like a normal gun, it's kind of a futuristic gun at the end of the episode. So definitely this is set in the future. So you have Malcolm Gilmore at CCPD talking to this new captain, and as she asks for ID, he pulls out his driving license, but his ID literally materializes in front of him, which is insane. I mean, who is he? That is the real question when you see this. That's what went through my mind. Like, how is this happening? Obviously it was blue, so you can presume it's Cobalt Blue related. But at this point, Malcolm is just extremely confused. He has no idea what's going on. His behavior is very erratic. He's desperate. And so he explains how there was a lightning strike at Mercury Labs and how he was affected, and then when he woke up, the file was there with Eddie Thawne. Obviously that's a redacted, classified file that he should never have his hands on, which in a couple of previous videos earlier last week, we theorized that this was definitely put there on purpose in order to lead Malcolm down the path of digging into Eddie and his past and his potential connection to him. But all of a sudden, as was established in the last episode, Cobalt Blue speaks to Malcolm and he goes, "Thawne," which is obviously him toying with him, trying to manipulate him in order to make him realize that he has to pursue finding out who Eddie Thawne is, and is it himself? Why does he look like him? That is the big question. So Cobalt Blue is inside his mind. But in the meantime, Iris is losing all hope and she's falling down this kind of darker path as everything is consuming her. But Cecile tries to convince her that Barry will come home, even though Iris isn't certain of it. And later in the episode, she even records like a final goodbye message to Barry. It's very emotional and I think Candace does a good job. However, I don't know if it was actually necessary because I feel like Iris would be more optimistic than this. They've been through so much together that I feel like there should be some hope there. I get that it's difficult circumstances because she is about to give birth, so I'll admit that it's definitely different. But as said before, Mark is going around under the guise of Cobalt Blue, so he's taken over him fully. At one point you get to see him with the crystal in his hand as he faces off against Keone, and Mark also sabotages Chester's search along with knocking out Cecile just outside of the time vault and basically trying to get all of Team Flash in the present. So let's go back to what's happening with Malcolm. So Malcolm is haunted by flashbacks, by voices within inside of his head. He even gets a bunch of Iris flashbacks, and so she actually becomes his main target to try and find out more about his past, and he just realizes bit by bit what he must do in order to get some answers. And so this is just the direction that he's heading in. But let's go to Cobalt Blue in Star Labs because Mark tries to take on Iris and he is very interesting in this scene. I would say this is one of the most interesting scenes in this entire episode. So Cobalt Blue goes, "Time to eliminate the competition permanently." He's mad at the entire Allen family, as is mentioned, and Cobalt Blue wants to get to Iris specifically. He's always wanted to kill Iris and Nora for a long time, which is not dissimilar to Reverse Flash if I'm being completely honest, but Speed Force Nora comes back in the nick of time, but she's hurting, so she's only able to hold off Cobalt Blue in the form of Mark just for a very short time. But what should we take away from this scene, from the fact that it's so personal to Cobalt Blue that they want to kill Iris and kill her daughter? Well, clearly they have some sort of emotional link, and it's said that they've been waiting a long time in order to try and kill them. Obviously that's because they're able to tap into maybe the negative Speed Force, and they're able to, you know, hop to different time periods. So I'm guessing at one point they got stuck, similar to Reverse Flash, and so they've not been able to surface just until now. But with Malcolm, we have him breaking into CC Citizen Media in the future, but you see some current employees in the building, which is very interesting. But he just reveals that he needs to see how Eddie died, and obviously his investigations into Iris led him to her office. Again, we don't know how far into the future this is, but it's still in the future, but most of the people aren't significantly aged. And so as everything spirals, Malcolm gets many more flashbacks into Eddie's past and how he even died. Super interesting. Let's move on to Cobalt Blue as they face off against Keone. We know that Keone was pissed off during this episode because of what Cobalt Blue, under the guise of Mark, said to her, obviously to get her away, because he knows that she is the only remaining threat in Team Flash, which is very interesting. But I guess they have already neutralized Allegra, who has powers too, and they've neutralized Cecile, so they're not going to be much help, and Keone's the only one out there. So he tries to tease Keone in order to kill Mark, and Keone actually goes for this. She straight up kills Mark, decomposes his body, almost Avengers Endgame style or Avengers Infinity War style, and brings him back to life. She calls herself a goddess right after this, and the fact that she can control all of the elements is a new thing that we are being told right now. So obviously in the comics, Keone is a goddess, so that makes sense, but it's interesting. She can control all the elements. She is very OP, as Cobalt Blue even said. So after this all happens, Keone reveals to Team Flash that she's going to leave the team and leave Central City, but not until they get Barry back, and not until everything is sorted and they've defeated Cobalt Blue. So this is interesting. I don't know why they had to do this at the end of the show. I guess they're just trying to set her on some sort of path before the show ends. But yeah, it was an interesting use of her powers, killing Mark and reanimating his body. But over in Star Labs, Iris is in labor. She needs to go to hospital, and out of nowhere, Barry somehow appears and makes it back to this exact same time just before Iris is about to give birth. It's a crazy coincidence, but it's great to see Grant back. Barry wasn't in this episode literally at all. Like, the only time we saw him was in flashbacks, and that's not new footage, so it was great to see Grant come back for the last 10-15 minutes of the episode. And so he talks about how he always knew his life would lead him back to that night, and so dealing with what happened in last episode, Barry still feels like he's found peace and he's home now. So this was a great scene. It's exactly what I was waiting for this entire episode. It actually really elevated the episode for me, and I loved that they went back into what happened last episode, and the fact that, you know, this was all meant to be this full circle moment of Barry replacing original Flash and being the one to tell him, well, his younger self to stop and besting Reverse Flash at his own game. And that's by finding peace with what's happened. Obviously, there's a fixed point in time. Barry knows this. He can't go back and change it, and he's accepted it. And I love what they did, and I like this continuation in this episode. We're going to make a couple more videos on that over the next week or so stay active for that. But Barry confirms to Team Flash that Cobalt Blue is able to be in multiple time periods at once, hence the parallel takeovers of multiple characters, Joe in the past and Mark in the future. But all of a sudden, Barry disappears again. Like, what the hell? He literally came back. Iris is about to give birth. She hasn't even given birth. It was a great scene between Iris and Barry, but they're really going to prolong this, which I think is very interesting and very dramatic. The fact that Barry was back, Iris was so happy, Barry was so happy, but now they have to do it all again, try and find Barry wherever he has gone. We need to get into that. Obviously, we're going to have our trailer breakdown out tomorrow. That promo that came out after the episode gives us some insight into where Barry has gone. Next week's episode is going to be heavy on Barry, so don't worry about that. Let's go on to talk about the final couple of things in this episode. So we have Malcolm Gilmore, who digs up Eddie's grave, and this is once again in the future, so it's not our current time period. And the captain of CCPD has this futuristic gun. She's like, stop what you're doing, this is a crime. And Malcolm just starts laughing maniacally, like he's going insane. That's the only way I can describe it. And he's like, there is no such thing as a coincidence. talking about the file on the ground, and obviously we know that that's been placed there by whoever targeted him with that red lightning, potentially from a negative Speed Force storm. And once again, Malcolm gets a bunch of flashbacks. He actually fully gets a good look at the way that Eddie lived and died. It's all coming together. You see Eddie proposing, fighting Reverse Flash, meeting Barry, and dying. At this point, he remembers absolutely everything that he basically needs to know, and he goes, "I am Eddie Thawne." He even has the bullet wound which appears. He pulls the bullet out, which is just an insane moment. So, what's going on here, guys? It seems this is our Eddie Thawne and not actually Malcolm Thawne or Malcolm Gilmore. That's just his made up name in this reality. This was one of my theories in my theory video last week, that this is actually Eddie who somehow survived the singularity, wound up in the future, and has totally forgotten absolutely everything, and so he's just going about his life until this incident, which led him down the path of discovering who Eddie Thawne is, and inevitably discovering that he is in fact Eddie Thawne. And he goes, "Now do you believe me?" And you get a flash of red lightning that hits the grave as the episode ends. What an ending to the episode. I couldn't believe what they did with Eddie right at the end, especially with the bullet wound. Like, that was just way extra, but it really served the purpose of saying, this is our Eddie. This is the one that supposedly died during the singularity, but somehow wound up in the future, potentially through that actual singularity. And so what we are witnessing is supposedly the birth of Cobalt Blue, and that is because this has been all led and manipulated by that voice in his head, which we're nearly 100% sure this is actually Cobalt Blue. And so he's just messing with Eddie like he is to all those people, but he has to do this because this is part of his full circle story, potentially, that the lightning bolt that struck him and left that file on the ground was done on purpose and sent by someone, but most likely probably himself, from somewhere else along the timeline. So that's it for this video, guys. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and a comment. Tell me, what did you think about this episode down in the comments below? I really want to hear your thoughts. I thought it ended really well. We had some great stuff with Malcolm. However, I do have to say it wasn't as crazy and as entertaining as the last episode, but I feel like that was an exception. It was one of the best episodes of The Flash, and I liked how we got to see the parallel of what was happening in the present day compared to what Barry was going through in the episode before. So for now, subscribe and turn on notifications to not miss any future videos. As I've said many times, we're uploading daily right now, so don't miss out on anything. I'm going to have my trailer breakdown out tomorrow, so go check that out when that comes out. But for now, you can click on the top right corner of the screen to watch my latest video, and I will catch you guys later. Goodbye.
I see red.